All right, hey guys. In this video, we're going to be talking about your short answer responses, the ASE format questions that you answered. They are short answer responses. The ASE is just the format. I know a lot of you call them ASE questions, but that really is just the format. So I like to call them short answer responses. We're going to go through basically an example response. This isn't a response that somebody's written, but talk about some issues with it and talk about how it could be better. The issues I pulled out and the example that I wrote is not what anybody wrote, but it is based off of continuous issues I saw throughout all the short answer responses. And because we're getting ready to start working on lit circles and things like that, I definitely wanted to go over the short answer responses, especially because on top of that, very soon we will also have Socratic circles, and that will require short answer responses. So we really need you to get to the point where you can respond to these questions in an appropriate manner, not to mention that it'll help you with your essay writing, especially when it comes to analyzing a quote. So what we're looking at here is one of the questions that you had from your Fahrenheit 451 essay, or I'm sorry, short answer questions. This was, I think, maybe the second or third one. And I'm going to show you an example. Like I said, I wrote this. This was not written by a student. It's just to kind of point out all the different issues that a lot of you are having. Not everybody. So you may be somebody that's not having these issues, but a lot of you are. So I feel like even if you aren't, it's just something that would be really good to reinforce. So let's just get right to it. So the question that we're going to look at today is there are several passages throughout that describe one of the many machines or technology in Fahrenheit 451. Pick one and analyze it. What does it symbolize and why? What could this symbolism be telling you about society or foreshadowing about the story? So one of the biggest issues I'm getting, or probably really the biggest issue, is that your answers are surface level. If I gave you a 2 or below on your short answer responses, which I know at home you probably didn't see those as much, but if you didn't score as well as you think, that could definitely be an issue there. And when I say surface level, I mean it's a literal interpretation of the text. This is an example of stuff that I was seeing. Like I said, I wrote this, but it's definitely based off of things I saw. So it says, in Fahrenheit 451, a snake machine is used to pump Mildred's stomach. They had 2 machines, really. One of them slid down in your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. This quote shows it is supposed to suck out the bad stuff and replace it with good stuff. It is personified to show how scary it is and how Montag views it. First off, something I didn't make a remark about in here, but I definitely would like to point out in this quote that I wrote myself, or this short answer that I wrote myself, strangely, it does overuse the word it and the pronoun it, so be careful of that. That's just a side note. Right off the bat, this answer fails to fully address the question. So very few of you, especially on this particular answer, now some of you did, but very few of you really addressed the symbolism of the machine. Like I said, a few of you did, but a lot of you didn't. You talked about the machine and you told me what the machine did, but you didn't tell me what it symbolized. And if you did tell me what it symbolized, you didn't give me any idea or understanding of why it symbolized that, or what that symbolism meant, or what it could possibly foreshadow, which were specific questions for you in your question. So you definitely want to get those in. I know with a lot of these, it can be very difficult because there's multiple questions in one. And my best response to you with that is the more you practice with it, the better at it you will get, because you do need to learn to encompass all those questions. If something happens and you miss 1 or 2, it's one thing. That's okay. But for our example here, they really didn't answer any of the questions. They didn't tell what it symbolized, and they didn't tell what it foreshadowed. They described it and they told what it did in the story, but that was the extent of it. And you definitely want to get as much of these questions in as possible. Another issue that I saw a lot of that I was kind of disappointed in, some of you attempted it and you did well. Some of you attempted it and you did not do so well. A lot of you did not attempt in any way to embed the quote. And that disappointed me because we talked about it. I want to see you embed the quote, not just for these short answers, but like I said, these short answers are a lead in to your essay. So you need to embed it so that you embed it in your essay so that your writing flows. And this quote, it's not embedded. There's nothing embedded about it at all. It's stuck in there. Now, granted, it makes sense for the most part, but it definitely not embedded. I can easily identify, even if the quotation marks were not there, where this quote went. So if you're not embedding it, you need to try to start doing that. This was a big issue, the idea of your transitions. Tons of you put, this quote shows, this idea tells you, this sentence tells us, this part of the story shows us. I mean, tons of you put that stuff. It's something I didn't plan for. I'm used to you having trouble transitioning into the quote. So I didn't think about the idea of you transitioning out of the quote, but you definitely need to transition on both sides. Your writing needs to flow all the way through. So you don't need to be able to see a break in where that quote starts and that quote stops and you pick up your writing. You have multiple ways you can do this, and I'm going to talk to you about it in just a second to give you some pointers on how to transition both with embedding and with moving into that discussion or that explanation portion of your short answer. But you do not want to say, this quote shows, this sentence tells, none of that kind of stuff. I don't want to see that. Or even some of you didn't put this quote, you just said, this shows. I don't want to see that. Okay, I want more solid transitioning there. You've got to move into that next step. I also saw a lot of low-level diction. I was disappointed in that. With the transitioning, I wasn't really disappointed in that. I know that's hard to do, so I understand that it's going to take you guys a little while to get there. But with the diction, we talked about that, and I feel like putting low-level diction in there is just laziness. So you need to up that diction. It needs to be much higher level, not good, not bad, not sad. Don't say stuff like, oh, she was happy and it made me so good, made me feel so good because she wasn't sad. You sound like you're in 5th grade and you are not, okay? You don't have to put off the chart crazy words. It doesn't have to be, in a minute you'll see me use the word volatile. It doesn't have to be like that. You could say she felt great or she felt amazing. You know higher level words. Now, you may have to stop and think about them, but you do know them. So you're more than welcome to use a thesaurus, of course. But I will warn you, if you use a thesaurus, don't use words you've never heard of, okay? Because you'll end up using them incorrect, and that's just as bad as using low level. Finally, the very last thing, this explanation is very surface level. It's scary, and it's how Montag views it. It really does make me want to say, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. I get that it's scary. I mean, a snake is a scary thing. And I get that that's how Montag views it because that's literally the purpose of a description. Like, if you looked that up in the literature dictionary, and yes, they do have a dictionary for literature stuff, and you looked up description or imagery, it would literally say that the purpose or the idea behind it was to let you see how someone viewed it or saw it or whatever. It's to create that image in your mind. So you're not doing anything for yourself here. You're not repeating the quote, but you're not expanding on it or explaining in any way whatsoever. So this honestly is the majority of what I got. And it's really not what I want to see. We're close. We're getting better. I see improvement, definitely. I see ideas being generated there, but it's not what I want to see. Before we move on, there is one more thing I want to talk about that I didn't include in this slide. It's really not so much with the at-home people or the remote learners as it is with the in-class learners. But Guys, I saw a lot of answers that were the same. It was either pretty much the exact same idea, maybe worded a little bit differently, slightly differently, not a lot, or it was flat out the exact same wording. In the future, you are not going to be rewarded for same old, same old. Now, I realize that a lot of you may be going to Cliff Notes or Spark Notes and you're getting ideas there. And so that's why a lot of the ideas are the same. And I realize that a lot of you are talking and discussing, and I get it. It was your first go round with 451 with short answers, and they weren't easy, and it was a lot of work. But one thing that goes a long way and means a lot to me, especially when it comes to literature analysis, is originality. So I want to see that thinking. I want to see that originality. If I get to your paper and you tell me something that's been told to me 10 times already about the symbolism there, I don't know. I really feel like that score is just steadily going to go down. So you're going to have to hope for one of two things. Either you're the very first person to be graded, and I think, oh, what a neat idea, or start thinking outside the box. Don't just go for your immediate response. Start thinking more there. So let's take this answer and let's look, or this question, and let's look at a possibility of how this could be done better, okay? So, same question, but different answer. This is what would be considered a deeper or higher level answer. So first I'm going to read through it, and then we can break down kind of what's being said and why and all that kind of stuff. So, in Fahrenheit 451, a snake-like machine is used to pump Mildred's stomach. So the first part's pretty much the same. When the emergency service technicians show up at Montag's house, they had two machines, really. One of them slid down into Mildred's stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well. Of course, Mildred has already died at this point, but the idea of something so deadly like a black cobra saving her is extremely symbolic. The cobra is a deadly snake, so while this machine is supposed to be saving Mildred, Bradbury wants to symbolically demonstrate she is only allowing more poison into her body and furthering her own death. More importantly, the acceptance of the use of this machine on so many people night after night symbolically foreshadows the impending doom of the entire society that is being poisoned on a daily basis by technology and the government. So first thing I will definitely say about this is this short answer actually addresses the questions. If you remember the questions, I'm just going to go back to them real quick. You see that it addresses the idea of symbolism, and heavily it talks about symbolism. It explains the symbolism. It also addresses foreshadowing, so it manages to capture both questions, which makes it even better. Now, if it hadn't captured the foreshadowing aspect, I probably wouldn't have scored it that low because the symbolism aspect is done so well. But it captures both, so it just takes it one step further. So let's look back at our question and see what else it does that's just done really well. The quote is embedded. It starts off by giving a general description to tell what's going on in the scene and breaking that general description into the quote. So it says, when the emergency service technicians show up at Montag's house. So that's how that embedding is created. There's other ways you can embed a quote. Obviously, transition words are great for embedding a quote. For example, therefore, stuff like that. Clearly, when the technicians show up, that kind of stuff. But it's always a good way to embed it by taking the previous sentence or the beginning of the sentence and paraphrasing it into your own words, or by paraphrasing in your own words what is going on in the scene that you are pulling the quote from. That can always be a really good way to embed it. So it's an excellent job there, and as you can tell, it flows much better. Another thing I will point out that I didn't point out in the notes per se, but I will point out, they cut off the quotes. They only used the portion of the quote that they needed. And I highly recommend that and will reward that, just for the simple fact that A lot of you overdid your length of your quote. Your quotes were really, really long. Some of you also put quotes back to back. Don't ever do that. If you're going to put quotes next to each other like that, you need to embed them and they need to flow. Like put that dot, dot, dot and make them flow into one another so that it reads. You've got to remember that you're reading a short paragraph, you're reading a short answer. And so you don't want the paragraph to come across disjointed or disconnected. You want a solid, continuous flow. So you need to stick with that idea all the way through. If you're breaking quotes apart, or if you're stopping at this quote and then starting with this idea, you're creating a disconnected or disjointed flow to your writing, and you want to get away from that. Like I said, they embedded it. Sorry. They also use brackets around their words. If you need to change up words in a quote, please feel free to do so. This person changed it from she, I believe is what it said. One of them slid down into, no, actually, I think it says your. Let's go back. In the original one, it has the quote. One of them slid down into your stomach, and it changes it specifically to Mildred so that it flows. We're talking about Mildred. We don't want to say your. We don't want to talk to the reader. We want to focus on what's happening with Mildred. So they changed it to say Mildred's stomach, like a black cobra down an echoing well. They also put that dot, dot, dot and cut off, let me show you with my cursor right here, cut off the end of the quote, pretty much because that stuff wasn't needed, especially for their explanation, which brings us to the most important part of their answer. Well, maybe not most important part. There is a smooth transition from the quote to the answer. This is achieved in two ways. A transition word is used. Of course, you see it used right here. It's also achieved by explaining what has happened. Once again, they draw in that scene and explain briefly what's going on in the scene. Of course, Mildred has already died at this point, but the idea of something so deadly like a black cobra. Notice that they pull out specific words and specific phrases from the quote. That is an excellent way to analyze. If you can focus on specific diction or specific phrases, it will force you to break your quote down more and to keep yourself from repeating. You don't have to do that, but it is a very good way to analyze. Anyway, they explain that this is symbolic, but then they take it one step further and they explain how. So many of you, I wanted to say how. How do you see this? How do you see this? And when we did the first short answer review, that was a big thing that we talked about. I saw a little bit of movement, which I was appreciative of. The fact that you guys were trying to get in that how, that's where you kind of got that surface level thing. We've got to take it one step further. So now we've kind of got where we know we need to do some explanation there. We know we need to be telling how. Now you need to get to really going in depth. Pretend like I'm a little kid and I don't understand what the black cobra would represent. I don't get it. You know, you're having a conversation with me and you say, well, yeah, it's totally symbolic of the fact that they're going to, she's just getting more poison into her body. And I say, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? Take that moment right then, like you're explaining it to your younger sister, or I don't understand what you're trying to tell me, and break it down and explain it from that degree. Push your point across. And that's what's done here. The cobra is a deadly snake. So while this machine is supposed to be saving Mildred, Bradbury wants to symbolically demonstrate she is only allowing more poison into her body and furthering her own death. Now, they did put death in quotations here because of the fact that it's not a real death, right? It's bringing her back to life. So the quotations here don't necessarily symbolize the fact that it's coming from the quote. It's the idea of she isn't really dying, but yet she isn't really alive. Finally, more importantly, the acceptance of the use of this machine on so many people night after night symbolically foreshadows the impending doom of the entire society that is being poisoned on a daily basis by technology and the government. So you get this idea of what it's symbolizing, not just for Mildred and not just for the reader, but what it symbolizes for society, which if you go back, guys, to that question, that's one of the things it asks. It wants to know about what it is foreshadowing for society. And that's something that y'all need to start doing, making sure in your answers that you are fully addressing these questions as much as possible. I do realize that it can be difficult to address every aspect, but as much as you can, you should really be kind of delving into that. And that's what this does. The explanation addresses all aspects of the question. It focuses on things that are less obvious. So it doesn't just tell me that it takes out the bad stuff and throws in the good stuff. It doesn't just tell me what's happening here. It doesn't, tell me that Montag's even upset, because that I can read and I can find out for myself. It takes a step further. It gives me that idea of poisoning, which I wouldn't have if it wasn't explained to me. Yeah, we know that a cobra is poisonous, but maybe I didn't see that connection. Maybe I need you to tell me that connection, that the cobra is poisonous, and because of this poisonous aspect, you see poison going back into the body. Metaphorically, of course. And it fully explains everything that is seen. So this is what you're going for and what you're trying to achieve, this level. I also want to point out one more thing before we move on to the practice, because we are going to practice one together and then have you practice a couple of on your own. But notice I highlighted different sections of this answer here. Notice how big the explanation section is. All of that is highlighted in that same color. It is the largest portion of the short answer. And that is 100% what you're going for, not just with these short answers, but with your essays as well. When you start taking these short answers and you're stretching them into body paragraphs, that's the same thing that you're looking for. You're looking for, you give your basic idea, which would be your essential answer. You insert or embed that quote, and then you have a long explanation. That is the idea of what you're going for. So let's practice one together. So the questions that we're going to go over together are going to be based off Scythe, because we are moving into that novel. So before you answer these questions, if you have not already, you need to read chapters 1 and chapters 2. It's not that long. It's like, let me see, total, trying to flip and see how long it is total. Chapters 1 and chapters 2, it's 28 pages. And you have to read it anyway. So I really want you to do that before you go through these. You will have to do it before you answer them, because you won't be really able to fully answer them well if you don't. So make sure you read it and you annotate it. So let's look at this first question together. How would you describe Citra? What could certain aspects of her characterization possibly be foreshadowing? First off, I know it asks you about you, but I do want you to start in all of your writing to try and take yourself out and answer in third person. Just in general, I'm not going to count off for it, but it'll be good practice for you with your essays, because I will count off for it in your essays. So let's start with your short answers by trying to get rid of that first person, that I, me, my. Even if it asks you for it, put it in third person, okay? Because if you remember back here, it actually asks, is it back here? Well, maybe it's not back here. In several of the questions that you got on 451, it actually asks you your opinion, but I want to try and see you move out of that. So first thing that I would do if I was answering this question is I would come up with my idea. What do I want to say about Citra? How do I think she's described? And then I would just simply answer it. Now, a lot of you put in the question. I would not put in, how would you describe Citra? I'm not going to write that out. Okay? A lot of you did that. You put, how would you describe Citra? I would describe Citra as da 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 da. When I say use the prompt or use the question in your own writing, I mean turn that question into a statement. So Citra is clearly a headstrong, independent, and emotionally driven person. So I'm answering that all the way through. And my answer is multifaceted, meaning I have a lot of ideas here in this answer. I don't just say she's smart or she's brave or I'm trying to think of another real basic one. She's scared or something like that. I really delve into what I think about her character, which ultimately that shows higher level thinking, and it's going to give you a better score when you start looking at these short answers. Of course, I want to address the second aspect. Now, notice I don't address it in my immediate answer, but I am going to address it before I am done. Okay? She doesn't get easily rattled, and when Faraday shows for dinner, she reacts to his presence without giving much thought to the consequences. Of course, she was well known for her temper. It often arrived before reason and left only after the damage was done. Now, I want to point out what I did here. On the last answer, the way that it was embedded was, yes, there were transition words used here, but this embedding was done by simply summarizing what was going on in the scene when the emergency service technicians show up, right? This embedding, I wanted to show you another possibility, is just simply including a transition word. Please don't use the same transition word over and over again. And please try both ways. You want your writing to be varied and you want to have the ability to vary how you write, because variety is the key to any type of writing. So if you transfer this over to Essay-Wise and you start using these short answer responses to create those body paragraphs in your essays, it's going to get old and redundant if you just keep using transition words to introduce your quotes. So it does work really well. It flows really well, but definitely try out other things besides just transition words. But like I said, they work. And that's what happens here. There's a little bit more explanation to her behavior, a little bit kind of lead in to what's going on, and then it leads into the quote that was chosen. And finally, biggest portion, just like before, you have your explanation. The damage that Citra refers to here could definitely foreshadow how her character is going to run into serious issues due to her emotions. So I've answered the question, but I've also come back now in my explanation. And once again, I've focused on key points or key things in that quote. I've honed in on whatever it was about that quote that made me think this stuff. What was it that in this quote that made me think she was headstrong or she was independent or she was emotional? There was something there. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen the quote. So if you reach that point, you're like, well, I don't know. There's something there. You need to think about it. And if you can't think of what it is in that quote that gives you that idea, that makes you think she's headstrong or makes you think she's independent, then one of two things is happening. Either you're not thinking deeply enough, you're not really focusing on what's drawing you to it, or you really need to choose a different quote because you chose it, but it's not really what initially made you think that. There's something else in there, and you need to try and find that quote and hone in on it. So anyway, I focus on key aspects of the quote and I explain those. And I answer the rest of that question. I'm going to talk about foreshadowing now. I don't go off and leave my original idea. I want to stick with it being about how she's characterized and how she's described, but I pull in that third aspect of the question about foreshadowing. So the damage that Citra refers to here could definitely foreshadow how her character is going to run into serious issues due to her emotions. While she doesn't hesitate to speak up when Faraday is present, unlike many of her other family members, the diction and the way in which Shusterman characterizes her here does not portray volatile emotions. Oh, I'm sorry. That's just me messing up. See, this is why you should reread your writing. Does not portray her volatile emotions as a positive thing. So that or should say her. Sorry about that, guys. Trying to find my cursor here. That or should say her. And volatile, good diction. I wouldn't use something you don't know, but if you know it, please use it. Simply using the word temper gives the reader a feeling of the somewhat judgmental tone, that's Shusterman's attitude, that he employs when addressing this issue with Citra. And one could easily or could only assume that there may still be more damage to come from her easily heightened emotions. So once again, you see a really long explanation. It breaks down specific ideas of the quotes. And I explain, this is why I see this. Okay, I know that I said she's headstrong. I know that I said she's independent. She's emotionally driven. These are the things within the quote that make me think these things. And this is why. So that's what you're going for. So what I want to see you do is right here, I want you to go in with this question, and you have one more. I'll pull it up right after this. You can pause the video. I will also put this PowerPoint just in general on Schoology so that you can just access it through the PowerPoint if you want. But these are your questions. In chapter 2, Rowan describes himself as the lettuce. What does this symbolize about his character? What possible foreshadowing lies within this symbolism and how Rowan is characterized? And then your second question that I want you to answer and submit today. In chapter 1, Scythe Faraday returns the knife that he uses to glean Citra's neighbor to Citra. What does he mean when he tells her, "We are all accomplices"? What does Citra's rejection of the knife symbolize, and what could it possibly foreshadow? All right, guys. I hope this helped you with your short answer writing. Please keep in mind, I am going to grade these short answers a little bit more strenuously than what I graded your last one, so please do your absolute best. They are still just a daily grade, but I do want to see you work pretty hard on them. So I hope you can get this done and submitted on time, and I will see you in the next video.